The House Committee on Labor will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Hatzma.
Present.
Representatives Menser.
Here.
Colazar.
Here.
Neal. Andrews.
Here.
Churches. Wagella.
Here.
Wozniak.
Here.
Mueller. Kuntz.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Might I have a motion to adopt the minutes from the April 25, 2024 meeting? Representative Colazar makes that motion. Today, we're present to take testimony on House Bill 5594. At this time, I'd call Representative Phil Skaggs to come up and present his bill to the committee. Good morning, Representative Skaggs.
Good morning, Chair Hatzma. Thank you for the invitation today, and good morning, Vice Chairs and members of the committee. I am here to talk about House Bill 5594, a modernization of the Youth Employment Standards Act. I'm going to thank you all for having me back. Again, we had this discussion back in the fall and winter about some of the issues and problems that we've been seeing around child safety and the importance of making sure that the labor of our children was not being exploited. So I'm back again to talk about a continuation of the work to make sure that our children are safe when they are in the workplace. So a little bit about a reminder about the why here. The why is we have had numerous now, both court cases that were settled by the Attorney General and media reports, and I really want to thank the media for bringing some of the issues that we're having with the exploitation of children to light, that have shown that we have, amongst a small percentage of employers, reports of unsafe working conditions for young people. Again, we have an individual whose hand was torn to pieces in a meat grinder in Ionia County, where we talked about last time the penalty could only be $1,200. Since then, we have had another youth fall from a third-story building, residential roofing going on and during construction. He broke his back and will be a paraplegic for life. So we are here to discuss this bill because I think that it will ensure that we have safe working conditions for children. So in the process of taking a deep dive into the Youth Employment Standards Act and the processes by which work permits are issued to minors, I've learned a lot, and working with the department have devised what we think is a modernization of the permitting process, which we think will be a win-win for everyone involved. Obviously, first and foremost, it will be a win for children. It'll be a win for minors. It'll be a win for teenagers. Secondly, this new system, which I'll discuss a little bit, and obviously the department will discuss in greater detail, will also be a win for employers. Because right now the antiquated system has youth interested in working go to the local high school and ask them for support and permits through this process. Then it goes to the Department of Labor, back to the employer, and circles around one more time. This can be a convoluted process, and although many school districts are extraordinarily diligent and fast-acting, because much of the employment can be in the summer, and because youth labor permitting is not the #1 mission of our K through 12 school system, sometimes we have delays in permitting. So you have a willing employer and a willing employee that has to wait sometimes for weeks to get a permit and be able to work. The which causes difficulties for both parties involved. The miner obviously would like to be compensated for their labor, and the employer obviously needs employees to further their business endeavors. And then we also finally think that it is a win for the school districts because, again, being involved in the work permit process, which probably made some sense in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, because this was the government that was closest to young people, is not their primary mission. And while this legislation continues to allow schools to revoke work permits and schools will be informed about work permits, it doesn't put them as a major cog in the machine of working through your permits. So the system that we have now is fairly antiquated. The bill that we are amending is from 1978. And since 1978, we have made a tremendous amount of technological breakthroughs. Computers are now fairly small. You can fit them in your pocket. The internet exists. And so it seems an antiquated system to go through high schools. So what this bill does is revamp, modernize with updated technology the system by which a young person gets their youth work permit. In this case, it will go through an electronic, online, perhaps even an app system where the youth will go through all of the same procedures that they go through now, just with updated technology, and instead of beginning at the school, they'll begin with immediate contact to the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. So this is the basics of the bill. I'll let the details be discussed by the department, but I want to thank the stakeholders that we worked with and that we reached out and talked about this. In conversations that we have had, we do think that there are a few technical fixes and refinements to language for clarity purposes that we'd like to put into an H1 that we hope to have very quickly. With that, I'll close my testimony and send it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Skaggs. Are there any questions of Representative Skaggs? Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'm sorry. Let me do this. Well, yeah. All right. Thank you, Representative, for coming today. Help me understand the need for the public registry of employers. I worry that's like a scarlet letter shaming. Why would we do that? I mean, obviously we report them to the department. They need to enforce it. But why do we need a public registry of employers?
Well, I'll let the department come up with an answer for that. My sense is that what we are trying to do, again, is streamline this process. A public registry, I don't think is a list of shaming. There's no shame in employing young people as long as you're abiding by the law. I think that what the idea here is to ensure that young people have a sense of what businesses might be looking for and willing to accept youth employment.
Thank you.
Representative Wagella.
First off, thank you for bringing this forward. In regards to kind of, I guess, registry questions, in my head, I imagine there could be some value in understanding where minors are being employed. And we have data that we can then look at and see, are there certain jobs where minors are being injured more, where they're being employed, et cetera? I don't know, I could see that being valuable. Do you see that as maybe a valuable piece of data for our state to have, and so forth?
Well, thank you, Representative Wagella. That allows me to expand a little bit on this, which I had forgotten to on my notes here. Yes, one of the things that we certainly learned in this process was that our labor laws for youth are strong and vigorous, and none of these bills that are being brought forward really make significant changes to our current labor law. What we have found is from last October is that the penalties are not strong enough to work as a deterrence effect for potential bad actors. But we also found that if we're looking for how we can educate employers on the differences between adult and minor labor laws, and frankly, in order to be able to enforce the Youth Employment Standards Act, that we do need to have the department have a sense of where are our Michigan minors working at. Because in the last budget, there was, and thanks to the department, there was a renewed emphasis on having staff focus specifically on YESA and YESA enforcement. But one of the impediments to child labor law enforcement is simply not knowing where they are. Because in Michigan, under our antiquated system, these are in high school administrator file cabinets, somewhere in their Google Docs, but in a place that is not available to Leo in order to, again, both educate our employers, which is their first goal, is to get to compliance through education, or if we do see industries or specific employers where we have seen an increase in child labor exploitation, that is a place to focus enforcement.
Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, and I do want to follow up that the department knows they're employed there. They get a W-2, they have an employment registry. The people that are in charge of enforcing our safety laws know they're employed there. This doesn't change that. This doesn't help us find out where the kids are working. That's already being reported.
I'll leave that answer to the department.
Thank you, Representative Skaggs. You may either stay right there and be joined by Mr. Egan, or alternatively, Mr. Egan, you can come up and trade chairs with Representative Skaggs.
I'll just go in the front row and
Okay,
call
thank
me
you.
if you need me, Chair. Thank you, members.
We're now here from Sean Egan, the Deputy Director of Labor within the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. And who else do we have?
Hicks and Randall Harris.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, Ms. Hicks, thanks for joining us. So I don't know who of the three is going first. Okay.
I am.
Okay, thank you, Jay Shauna. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Hadsma and committee members, for the opportunity to speak today. Again, my name is Jay Shauna Hicks, and I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, also known as LEO. With me today is Sean Egan, our LEO Deputy Director for the Labor Division, and Randall Harrison, our State Assistant Administrator for the Labor Division. Today we are here to testify in support of House Bill 5594, which would require LEO to create and maintain a registration system that allows minors seeking employment and employers of minors to register with the department. I want to express our gratitude to Representative Skaggs for introducing this legislation and also being a champion for youth employment reform. In October, our office testified in support of House Bill 4932 and House Bill 4962, which increases penalties for companies that violate existing labor laws, in response to recent media reports on child labor violations in Michigan. While this is a measure that can deter future violations, a proactive policy solution needs to be done to ensure the protection of our employed youth. And so while that was more of a reactive approach, this bill, House Bill 5594, is more of a proactive solution, because while we do have the authority to investigate any establishment where minors are employed. We lack a mechanism to know where they may be before a violation occurs that triggers an investigation. And House Bill 5594 addresses this issue. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean and Randall to give you all a high overview of the current youth permit process, and then also kind of share with you what this, the new process would look like should this legislation pass.
Thank you, Ms. Hicks.
Thank you and good morning. Randall Harrison, a State Assistant Administrator, is with us today because he spent 16 years in the Wage and Hour Division. So if we have specific questions about what happens out there, Randall will be able to help us answer those more effectively. Youth employment, I think I shared last time, is largely broken down into two groups, 14 and 15-year-olds, and then 16 and 17-year-olds. There's different requirements and actually different forms currently for each of those age groups because of the hours they can work and some of the other calculations, or one in particular that has to happen for 14 and 15-year-olds. They set the hours of work, number of hours worked, breaks and rest periods, and certain occupations have been determined to be hazardous to the health of minors, and those are different for those age groups as well. I think I mentioned last time we were here that the Federal Department of Labor also has jurisdiction over youth employment, and they set the floor that the states have to abide by. Just about every state has adopted some form of youth employment standards that add to that floor, us included. So we're one of 37 states that require work permits as well that are not required under federal law. And out of those 37, 11 have permits that are issued by their Department of Labor, 20 have permits that are issued by the schools, and then the other 6 have a mix. They each have a role to play within those issuing of work permits. Under our current law in Michigan, those are issued, as Rep. Skaggs said, by local school districts, and they do not come to us. I think the rep unintentionally misspoke when he said it goes to the Department of Labor. It does not come to the Department of Labor. It goes kid to the school, to the employer, back to the school. There's no spot in there right now where the Department of Labor is involved in the work permit process until there's a problem. So we believe that this shifting to an electronic database is wonderful, and I think it'll make it much easier for employers, for kids, for schools out there to relieve some administrative burden, some record-keeping requirements, and we think it'll make it faster. And we like the idea of one type of system that everybody gets used to across the state. Right now, it's a school district by school district issue. We know that some are very, very good. We know that some, it's just another thing they have to do. And we do hear from employers that it takes quite a long time sometimes, depending on where you are, to get that work permit issued. So we think that we'll be quite fast when we get this thing up and running and be able to authorize and to provide work permits to employers out there. So current process versus the new process. Frankly, before March of 2021, it was all paper, and the law actually said you had to have different colored paper for the age group. So in 2021, you all amended that to make it electronic. Everybody's very thankful for that because it made that life a lot easier. But they're still separated by age groups, and it's basically the same form, but now fillable PDF, so it's a little bit of a challenge. You go to your local school district. I won't belabor this point, but you get your work permit. But that's true for any kid in that district. So it doesn't matter if you're actually a student there. You're required to go to that school district. So when we talk about homeschooled kids, we talk about kids enrolled maybe in charter schools or otherwise, they still have to go to that same public school district to get a work permit. And I think we all know in the summer, that's where we hear mostly from employers is that can become quite a bit more challenging to make sure that you're connecting with somebody at the school district to get that work permit issued, signed off on, and everything else. In theory, those people in the local school district are called issuing officers under the law, and in theory, they're educated on youth employment standards, and they understand when they get a work permit, if that workplace is a place where young minors can work, how many hours are they working, all of those kinds of things that go along with being in compliance with the Youth Employment Standards Act. I think in some areas we know that's really good, in some areas it's just another thing to do, and it's passed off to whomever can take the time to kind of get those work permits done. Next, the student takes it over to the prospective employer, they fill out their portion, goes back to the school. And then an employer, at the time of permitting or afterward, can request a deviation, and that is a deviation from the standard rules. So if we wanted a kid to work to 9:30 instead of 9 for a certain age group, we request a deviation from us. And then the school has no idea that we've granted a deviation. So it's kind of like a hodgepodge of pieces that aren't really fitting together very well, and we think we can make it better. And we've been working with the Michigan Department of Education all the way through on this registration concept, and the Department of Labor taking it, and they're very in support of, at least last time I talked to them, in support of this transition over to the Department of Labor to handle the work permits. It's not something that they want to deal with, and not something that the schools really want to continue to carry, from the best that we understand it. So what we would like to do is just make this electronic, and that database or registration concept is modeled off of language in New Jersey. They transitioned pretty recently to this. There are a few other states that have this nice, quick electronic registration process through their Department of Labor. I think Louisiana is one of those as well. But this language made sense. For simplicity, the minor that wants to work would register with our system once. Once age is verified and everything else, you're not going to do that time and time again anytime they switch jobs or change employment. You don't have to renew a work permit until you change employment. So if you're terminated from your job, or you just don't go back to that job and you're going somewhere else, each time that triggers a new work permit. We think in the system, having sort of a My Login setup where it just follows the kid until they're 18 years old is going to really simplify the process for all those involved. From there, electronically, it goes to the employer. Employers that routinely employ minors are going to be in a similar situation where after the first time this is kind of handled, they're going to be in a click button situation where it's, yes, I'm just adding another minor to employment here. They're not going to have to re-verify all of the information that they would write out on this form every single time. And then we all know that parents and schools still have some role to play in this, and from there it goes to the parent for sign-off. And they get a certain period under the proposed legislation to give them some time. If they don't do anything with that, there's a time limit just to kind of keep the process moving, and then schools would get notified and continue to have the right to revoke a work permit for the same things they can under the law right now: poor performance, not attending school, those types of things. So most of the information's internal, but in the legislation, as Representative Kuntz asked about, there is a public portion of that for the employers. It's not intended to show any kind of information about the minors that are working there, or the number of minors, or anything else. Again, that was modeled from New Jersey. I think the intent was to make it easy for a minor to kind of see what employers are out there, to make it easy for employers to look up and make sure that they are properly registered, that, you know, that they're in good standing, to make it easy for schools to see where a kid might be working, to know that that employer does have the appropriate registration and all that kind of stuff. And then certainly for all of us as parents to kind of understand where kids are and be able to respond accordingly. It would be very basic stuff. It would be, you know, XYZ employer at this address. That's basically all it would say. There's no intention for shaming or anything like that. It's just, it's public information anyway. Make it transparent, make it easy. You know, I'll take some, we're ready for any kind of questions that you have, but overall, like, we're pretty excited about the concept. We think it standardizes the process for employers across the state of Michigan, for young workers across the state of Michigan, makes it easier for the schools, changes record keeping, and then one of the things most importantly for us is just then we know where kids are working, because we don't right now. And I can answer, if you don't mind, Representative Kuntz brought up the W-2 question. Like, we don't get that information. We don't know where kids are working. There's no tax stuff coming to us that says, hey, everybody's working over here, and that information wouldn't identify necessarily age. So this is a more effective way for us to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Egan. Mr. Harrison, anything to add right now?
Yes.
Slide in here.
All right, buddy. Good morning, Chair Hadsma and committee members. My name is Randall Harrison, and as Director Egan stated, I am his Assistant Administrator within the Office of Labor. Before this current role, I served as an investigator within the Wage and Hour Division for 16 years, the last 5 as a senior investigator. It was my job to investigate these youth employment complaints as well as any other issues that the Wage and Hour Division is tasked with. When it comes to youth employment, I would not have contact with a child, a parent, or an employer until a complaint is filed. But at that time, it's a little too late because the law had already been violated. So the most serious issue that I've ever investigated was an issue where a kid was playing with a slicer that he should not have been using, and he sliced his finger down to the bone. Now, unfortunately, a few of my former colleagues have investigated issues that were way more serious. The division had no knowledge of these children in this case that we have to investigate until there is an issue. But in this particular case, this was referred to our division from the Worker Disability Compensation Agency, and it was because an injury claim was filed on his behalf. So Director Egan's view of the regulatory space, as he stated in previous testimony, that we're looking to educate before we regulate. And unfortunately, the current work permit process does not allow us to do that. It does not allow us to educate everyone. Everyone is children, the parent, and also employers. I would like to tell you all just a quick story of how a registry would kind of pretty much streamline the process, make everyone's life better while ensuring the safety of children. So in my personal life, I am a father of 2 daughters, 17 and 7. Please don't ask me about the gap. Ask my wife. But my 17-year-old will be 18 years old in about 28 days. So in about 4 weeks, this law will not apply to her. But a few months ago, it did. So it was one Saturday. I finished up early on the golf course. I had a couple of hours between engagements, so I sent her a text message while she was at her job tearing movie tickets. And I asked her if she wanted to go out to lunch. My daughter never turns down a meal, but she replied back and said that she could not go. So I wondered, like, why don't you want to go? And she replied and said, I don't go on break until 2:30. So I'm doing a calculation in my head. She went to work at 8 a.m. and she's not going to go on break until 2:30. Now, that's a violation of the Youth Employment Standards Act because you have to have a half-hour break per every 5 hours worked. So what I could have did was I could have waited until Monday to just send over a referral to our labor agency and let them deal with it. But the second option, which was education, was the better option. So later on that day, I visited her employer and I had a conversation with the general manager and also the owner. And I provided them with a fact sheet of the law, copies of the law, and I sat there and answered any questions because they had no knowledge of their requirements under the act when it comes to employing minors. So my daughter went to work that Sunday, and she told me that her manager said that he really appreciated that I came out and I sat down and I informed him of what they need to do. And then also that next day, he had the schedule change in reference to minors, implementing break periods, ensured that minors were not doing jobs that are not in compliance with the act. So, the investigators within the Wage and Hour Division, they have a requirement to do educationals. There is a specific number of educationals that they have to do per year. And the conversation that I had with that general manager and that owner are conversations that those investigators can have up front with business owners to educate them of the law, but if they know where these minors are employed. So as Director Egan stated, outreach and education is pretty much at the forefront of what we expect from our labor agencies, and we do believe that this tool would be vital for us to continue that while ensuring that these individuals that are going to be a part of our future workforce one day are safe. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Representative Colasar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. Mr. Harrison, you kind of were touching a little bit on what I was going to get to, but I've kind of been sitting back here taking a little journey in my mind back to the 90s when I was 16 and 17 getting those early jobs. And I remember thinking back, I'm like, I don't think my employers were always following the law. And my question then is, how in the world is this actually enforced?
Currently, under the current system, it's really a complaint-driven process. So if you're out there, certainly some establishments we know, I won't name any names, but we know that some employers are often employing youth, especially during summer, but by and large, it's a complaint-driven system. So we do as much education outreach as we can, but it's sort of self-selecting in because we don't know who's employing young workers, but for our, won't belabor that point, but right now, it's basically when we get a complaint.
So follow up, if I may. Is it fair for me to say that in a lot of situations, we're putting the onus of enforcement on a 16 or a 17-year-old
Yes.
to actually do that complaint or their family?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming today. When a 16-year-old has a complaint, do you think they'd be more comfortable going to a school counselor or logging onto a website?
We would have to ask them, right?
That's rhetorical. Clearly, they'd be more comfortable talking to someone they trust and know versus an unfaced bureaucracy. So the issue of keeping this local is no one knows the student better than the schools. And when a work permit gets denied, I mean, this is mandatory reporting. If a student comes with an issue, they're by law required to report it. So I don't see how we're making this easier for a student when now it's a faceless that it's someone we don't know. And I want to touch one more time on the government bureaucracy. I'm sure the state of Michigan has your birth date when you file your taxes. I don't accept that you say, well, that's a different department. No, that's our fault. We need to make that better. We don't need to create the onus on people to do it. We have the information, we just don't share it.
There's nothing in the statute as written that would prevent that student from also talking to the school counselor. So even though the counselor is not issuing the permit, they can certainly feel comfortable to go talk to the school counselor.
Representative Wigella.
Just a brief question. Who do you think has a better understanding of child labor laws, a school counselor or Leo?
Leo.
Representative Mueller.
So if the school's doing this and the employer's doing it, why don't you just have the schools send it to Leo? Why have the small businesses have to have more bureaucracy when the school's already doing it? Just have the school district send a list of kids that are working. The system's not really broken. I think we just want to create more bureaucracy to give the department more money is what it seems like to me.
Well, there is no money tied to this, and there is no fee tied to this. There is no additional money tied to this, and the bureaucracy for the small employer is just simply moving who the form is tied to, so it actually doesn't add any burden for the small employer. It's literally just moving where the form lives.
So I must have misread the memo that said it was going to be an $800,000 one-time fee and a $300,000 annual fee.
I apologize for this chair in between us. I'm trying to make eye contact with you, but there certainly is a tech build. You're building a new database, right? So we did look back and looked at other states and looked at other programs. So certainly, but to your point, the question I was answering is there's no fee for the kid, there's no fee for the employer, there's no fee for anybody going on that way, but certainly for the database build, and the on-time is related to, or ongoing is related to FTEs to manage the system.
Okay, all I was saying is we have a lot of small businesses out there that are struggling to survive because of what the government did to them a few years ago, and then we're going to add more bureaucracy to them when the schools already have the information and they can send it to Leo, and then you have your database.
I'm not sure there's a question there, but I think there's one implied. If you'd like to answer, please go ahead.
To the point, I think for this concept of adding bureaucracy is wrong. You're removing the bureaucracy from one local government, being the school district, and moving the administration of the program to Leo. It's actually going to be easier, quicker, faster for small businesses that are employing youth.
Okay, because I'm looking at this too, which the small business people don't really agree, but I'll stop asking you more questions.
Thank you, Representative Mueller. So I have a question for any of the three of you who are here. Perhaps Mr. Harrison might be the one best to answer. But if we have this unified, streamlined process rather than the balkanized process which exists now, do we ensure that there's better education of employers? And by doing that, do we ensure that a minor doesn't lose a hand or become lifetime paralyzed, as Representative Skaggs has indicated has happened in a couple recent occasions?
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Chair Hadsma. So you are correct. The education level will go up because now the investigators, they're already doing educationals throughout the year. So during these educationals that they are mandated to do, they will now know where children are working, and they will be able to go to these entities where the children are working and provide that outreach and education. The way the education process is now, they are just randomly selecting businesses to go and give education about all of the laws that the division enforces. But now, if they know businesses where children are working, they can definitely prioritize those businesses to provide that outreach and education.
Go ahead.
That is the goal, to identify where kids are working and make sure that we're out there doing education and outreach to those types of employers that are going to have kids. Like I mentioned, we know some. There are retail employers that we know are going to employ youth. We talk with them all the time. And we try to make sure that they understand, and they do understand because they've been doing it for a long time. But this would put us in a better position to target that outreach.
Thank all three of you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
We have some cards to read in. None of these wish to speak. Opposing the bill is Amanda Fisher from NFIB. Opposing the bill is Marcus Keach from the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. Opposing the bill as written is Wendy Block from the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, and I should note the same is true of Marcus Keach. He qualified his opposition is as written. Opposing the bill as introduced, and an indication that there is work ongoing with the sponsor is Amy Drum of the Michigan Retailers Association. Opposing the bill is Jacob Manning of the Small Business Association of Michigan. Opposing the bill as introduced is Dawn Crandall of the Home Builders Association of Michigan. Opposing the bill as written is John McNamara of the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association. Supporting the bill is Ann Coonan of the Michigan League for Public Policy. There being no further, we do have an absent member or two. Oh, I know. You did, absolutely, you let me know. Excusing our one absent member, I'll entertain a motion for that from somebody. Representative Andrews makes that motion. That absent member is excused. There being no further business before this committee, this House Committee on Labor is adjourned.